The agreement. Jade Winters clutched her coffee cup like a lifeline as she studied the man across the table. Nathaniel Porter was exactly what she expected from the CEO of Horizon Innovations. Innovations impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. Hiss. Posture rigid, dark eyes calculating as they assessed her. He looked like someone who had never worried about making rent in his life. "Let me be clear," he said, sliding a folder toward her. "This arrangement would be temporary. 2 years maximum, with an option to dissolve earlier if my company's situation stabilizes." Jade nodded, her throat tight. "And the terms?" "You'll have access to a joint account for appearance's sake. The brownstone in Brookfield has plenty of room for privacy. We'll need to attend certain functions together. Galas, dinner parties, the occasional weekend retreat with business associates." His voice was methodical, as if he were outlining a standard business contract rather than a marriage proposal. "In return, you'll receive the lump sum we discussed, plus monthly allowance." The amount he named so casually would cover her grandfather's specialized care facility for years. After 6 months of watching medical bills devour her savings while the nursing home threatened to discharge Grandpa Thomas, Jade had run out of options. "And to be perfectly clear," she said, meeting his gaze directly, "this is strictly a business arrangement. No physical obligations." A flicker of something, perhaps offense, crossed Nathaniel's face. "I'm not looking for companionship of that nature, Ms. Winters. I need investors to see stability, not a bachelor who might make impulsive decisions. My family's company is hanging by a thread, and the board has made it clear they want leadership that appears settled." Jade nodded. She'd done her research after receiving his unexpected proposition through a mutual acquaintance. Horizon Innovations, once a technological powerhouse, had been struggling since Nathaniel's father died suddenly last year, leaving his 32-year-old son to pick up the pieces. "Your background is perfect," he continued. "Master's degree in education, respected teacher, community volunteer work. You're exactly the type of partner that would reassure my conservative investors." Jade flinched inwardly at being reduced to a resume, but wasn't she doing the same to him? Seeing him as a means to an end, a solution to her financial desperation? "The prenuptial agreement is straightforward," he said, tapping the document. "Your privacy is protected, as is mine. When we dissolve the marriage, you keep what you've earned. No questions asked." Jade stared at the signature line. 2 years of pretending, 2 years of lies. But her grandfather would get the care he needed, the care she'd promised her late mother she would ensure he received. When would we... She couldn't bring herself to say get married. "Thursday, City Hall. My assistant will arrange everything. 3 days." 3 days until she became Mrs. Porter in name only. "I know this isn't ideal," Nathaniel said, his voice softening slightly, "but we both get what we need." Later that week, they stood before a judge, exchanging vows neither meant. Jade wore a simple cream dress, Nathaniel a blue suit, assistant, and the company lawyers served as witnesses. No family, no friends, no celebration. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Nathaniel brushed his lips against her cheek there first, and she assumed last physical contact. "Thank you," he whispered so only she could hear. That evening, Jade moved into the sprawling brownstone. Nathaniel showed her to a bedroom suite on the opposite side of the house from his own. "My housekeeper comes Mondays and Wednesdays," he explained. "I'm usually gone by 7 and back after 8. Help yourself to anything you need." With that, he retreated to his home office, and Jade was left alone in her new role, a wife who wasn't really a wife, in a home that wasn't really a home. Parallel Lives October bled into November, and Jade settled into a rhythm at the brownstone that rarely intersected with Nathaniel's. Their marriage existed in the margins, brief exchanges over breakfast, carefully coordinated appearances at corporate functions, and the occasional text message about household matters. Jade spent her days substitute teaching at local schools, refusing to give up her career entirely, despite Nathaniel's assurance that it wasn't necessary. When not working, she visited her grandfather at Pinewood Care Center, where he now had a private room with a garden view, a luxury that still made her throat tight with gratitude whenever she thought about it. "You seem distracted today, dear," Grandpa Thomas said during one visit, his arthritic hand covering hers. His mind remained sharp, despite his physical decline. His eyes still twinkling with the same wisdom that had guided her after her parents' death. Just tired, Jade lied, adjusting his blanket. She'd told him she'd received an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative, another lie in the growing collection she kept catalogued in her mind. "How's your new physical therapist working out?" He gave her a look that said he wasn't fooled by the subject change, but answered anyway. "Dominic's a good fellow. Pushed me an extra lap today." His smile faded. "You still haven't brought that husband of yours to meet me?" Jade busied herself arranging the flowers she'd brought. "He's very busy with work. Maybe next time." The truth was, she and Nathaniel had an unspoken agreement to keep their separate lives separate. She hadn't met his friends. He hadn't met hers. Their social media accounts remained unchanged, no relationship status updates. No photos together except those carefully staged by Nathaniel's PR team for specific investors to see. That evening, Jade returned to find Nathaniel's sleek black car in the driveway hours earlier than usual. She found him in the kitchen, loosened tie hanging like surrender around his neck, staring into a glass of amber liquid. "You're home early," she observed, setting down her bag. "Board meeting ended sooner than expected." God, his voice had an edge she hadn't heard before. "Turns out our marriage hasn't quite convinced everyone of my stability." Jade opened the refrigerator more to have something to do than from hunger. "I'm sorry to hear that. Dalton suggests we need to be more ... visible." Nathaniel took a long sip from his glass.
Yes.
"He thinks we should host a holiday party here.
Dos.
For key investors and their spouses." Jade froze. "Here? In this house?
Right.
A problem?" Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "It's just," Jade gestured vaguely at the space between them. "We barely know each other. How are we supposed to convince people we're happily married if we can't even decide what to have for dinner together?" Something flashed in Nathaniel's eyes, frustration, perhaps, or recognition of the truth in her words. "Then, we'll need to get better at this. Fast." The next 2 weeks brought an unexpected shift in their arrangement. Suddenly, Nathaniel was asking about her day over dinner that they now intentionally ate together. He listened attentively as she described a breakthrough with a struggling student, and she found herself genuinely interested when he explained the renewable energy project that had consumed his year. They developed a crash course in each other's life's favorite books. Childhood memories, allergies, pet peeves information, exchanged with the efficiency of business partners preparing for an important presentation. "Your father built the company from nothing?" Jade asked one evening as they reviewed the guest list in the living room. Surprised to find herself genuinely curious, Nathaniel nodded, something softening in his expression. "Started in our garage when I was 10. He was brilliant, could see technological needs before the market even knew it wanted them." He traced the rim of his cup. "Everyone expected me to be just like him. And are you?" "No." The word held a weight Jade hadn't expected. It was visionary. "I'm practical. There's value in that too," Jade said quietly. "Dreams need someone to ground them." Nathaniel looked at her with slight surprise, as if seeing something new in her face. The night of the party arrived with a light snowfall that transformed the brownstone into something from a holiday card. Jade wore a forest green dress that complemented her auburn hair, carefully selected to project the image of sophisticated domesticity. "You look lovely," Nathaniel said when she descended the stairs, his eyes lingering longer than strictly necessary for their arrangement. "Thank you." She straightened his tie, a surprisingly intimate gesture that neither acknowledged. Ready to convince the world we're madly in love? His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The party unfolded with practiced precision. Jade played her role flawlessly, charming Nathaniel's associates with stories that strategically wove in details of their relationship. Nathaniel kept her within arm's reach all evening, his hand occasionally resting on the small of her back, each touch sending an unexpected warmth through her body. "How did you two meet again?" asked Vivian Dalton, wife of Nathaniel's most a skeptical board member. Before Jade could recite their rehearsed story, Nathaniel interjected, "Community fundraiser." She was arguing with the organizer about allocating more resources to senior services. His eyes met Jade's with something like genuine admiration. She was passionate, articulate, and completely unimpressed by me. I was intrigued immediately. Improvisation startled Jade, but she recovered quickly, playing along. What surprised her more was how natural it felt to laugh with him, to finish his sentences, exist in this pretend world where they had chosen each other. Later, after the last guest departed, they stood in the kitchen in comfortable silence, Nathaniel washing glasses while Jade dried them. "I think we convinced them," he said finally. "I think we did," she agreed. Then, more softly, "You were good tonight." He handed her another glass. "So were you." Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and neither pulled away immediately. For a suspended moment, they were just two people standing close in a quiet kitchen. The line between performance and reality momentarily blurred. Nathaniel broke the spell first, clearing his throat. "I should finish some work before bed." Jade nodded, suddenly very interested in the glass in her hands. "Good night, then." As she climbed the stairs to her separate bedroom, Jade realized with a jolt of alarm that for a few dangerous moments tonight, she had forgotten they were pretending. "The Blizzard's revelation, you can't be serious," Jade said, staring at the email on her phone. "A weekend retreat? With the board members and their families?" Nathaniel continued packing his laptop into his leather bag, his movements methodical. "Dalton's cabin in the Adirondacks. It's tradition, apparently, though one my father always attended alone. 3 months into their arrangement, and the boundaries kept shifting. What had begun as occasional public appearances had evolved into dinners, parties, and now this a full weekend pretending to be a loving couple without a moment's respite. "I have plans with my grandfather on Sunday," Jade protested, though. She already knew she would cancel them. The success of Nathaniel's latest project hung in the balance, and with it, the security of their arrangement. "We'll be back by Sunday afternoon." Nathaniel paused, studying her face. "Unless you'd rather. I make excuses for both of us." The question held no judgment, just a simple offering of choice. These small considerations had become more frequent, and you'll check in before committing her to events, asking her preferences, acknowledging that their contract didn't obligate her to every demand. "No," Jade sighed. "I'll go, but you owe me." Ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Add it to my tab." The drive to the mountains took 3 hours, during which they rehearsed details about their relationship with the precision of actors preparing for a performance. Yet somewhere between discussing favorite vacation spots and debating which side of the bed each preferred, the conversation drifted into genuine territory. "Wait, you actually climbed Kilimanjaro?" Jade asked, turning in her seat to face him. Nathaniel nodded, eyes on the road as snow began to dust the windshield. "After college, my father thought it would build character."
I did it.
"It taught me I prefer central heating," he replied dryly. Earning a laugh from Jade that felt surprisingly natural, the Dalton cabin turned out to be a sprawling timber lodge overlooking a frozen lake, where 5 other couples had already gathered. Jade recognized most of them from previous events, the influential investors whose approval Nathaniel needed to secure his position. Nathaniel finally made it through the snow, called Richard Dalton, clapping him on the shoulder before turning. "To Jade and the lovely Mrs. Porter. We were beginning to think he'd invented you before the holiday party." Jade smiled, leaning into Nathaniel as his arms circled her waist. "He does have a vivid imagination." The evening progressed with dinner, drinks, and careful conversation. Jade found herself paired with Elise Chen, whose husband controlled significant shares in Horizon Innovations. "How are you adjusting to being a CEO's wife?" Elise asked, swirling her wine. "The first year is always the hardest." Jade considered her answer carefully. "It's been an adjustment, but a worthwhile one." Elise's gaze drifted to where Nathaniel stood talking with 2 board members. "Lawrence was the same way when we first married Allwork, barely home. I told him if he wanted heirs to his fortune, he'd better remember he had a wife." She patted Jade's hand. "Don't let him put it off too long, dear. Children have a way of reminding men what matters." The comment sent an unexpected pang through Jade's chest. Children. Of course, people would expect that from a young married couple. It was a complication they'd never discussed. an extension of their fiction that couldn't exist. Later, in the privacy of their assigned bedroom, one bedroom, with one king-sized bed, Nathaniel noticed her distraction. Something wrong? Arranging pillows down the center of the bed as they'd awkwardly agreed upon. Elise Chen asked about our plans for children, Jade admitted. Sitting on the edge of the mattress, Nathaniel's hands stilled. I didn't know what to say. He sat beside her, careful to maintain distance. I'm sorry. Should have anticipated that question. It's fine, I just... She shook her head. Sometimes I forget how many layers this deception has. How many? Futures were falsifying. Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. When I was growing up, my father missed every school play, every baseball game. Built an empire, but was a stranger in his own home. His voice carried no accusation, just a matter of fact. Acceptance. I always thought if I ever had children, I'd do it differently. The confession hung between them, unexpectedly personal, and Jade found herself sharing in return. My parents died when I was 19. Car accident. Grandpa Thomas raised me after. That. She twisted her wedding band a beautiful prop in their elaborate play. He's the only family I have left. That's why you were so desperate to help him, Nathaniel realized. The pieces finally connecting. He sacrificed everything for me. His retirement, his savings. Her voice caught. I couldn't fail him. Outside, the snow that had been falling, steadily all evening, increased in intensity. Wind howling around the eaves of the lodge. Neither of them noticed morning brought a transformed landscape. 3 feet of snow had fallen overnight, with more still coming down in swirling sheets of white. Power lines were down across the region, and the lodge had switched to generator power. Roads are completely impassable, Richard announced at breakfast. State police say it could be tomorrow before plows reach this area. Trapped. The word echoed. In Jade's mind, as she helped prepare coffee on the gas stove, hyper-aware of Nathaniel's presence, as he chopped wood for the massive stone fireplace in the great room. As the day progressed, the generator began to falter, eventually surrendering to the storm entirely. The lodge grew colder, and the couples gathered in the great room where the fireplace provided both warmth and light. I pose a game, announced Vivian Dalton as evening approached. Something to pass the time. How about how well do you know your spouse? Jade felt Nathaniel tense beside her on the sofa. This wasn't part of their script. The game began innocuously enough: favorite colors, foods, films. Jade and Nathaniel had rehearsed enough to handle these questions. But then came more personal territory. What does your spouse consider their greatest regret? Richard asked, turning to them in the flickering firelight. Jade met Nathaniel's eyes and saw something shift there, decision being made. He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a gesture that felt suddenly, startlingly real. Jade regrets not being able to save her parents, he said softly. Not being there when the accident happened. The room fell silent. Wasn't something they'd rehearsed? It wasn't something she'd ever told him directly. Yet he had pieced it together from their conversations. From the things she hadn't said as much as those she had. When it was her turn, Jade found herself speaking. From a place of unexpected certainty, Nathaniel regrets that his father never saw him as himself, just as an extension of the company. He's afraid he'll never live up to that legacy, but even more afraid of what happens if he does. His fingers tightened around hers, confirmation that she had seen the truth in him too. Later, when the others had retired to their rooms with extra blankets against the deepening cold, Jade and Nathaniel remained by the dying fire. How did you know? About my parents? He stared into the embers. The way you talk about responsibility, about not failing people who depend on you. His eyes met hers. You carry it like someone who knows what it means to lose everything. And you carry your father's expectations like armor, she observed. Protection and prison all at once. The fire crackled in the silence that followed, casting shadows across their faces. When Nathaniel spoke again, his voice was different, stripped of the careful restraint that usually governed it. What are we doing, Jade? She knew he wasn't asking about their current situation, trapped in a snowbound lodge. He was asking about the changing landscape between them, the boundaries that had begun to blur. I don't know, she admitted. This wasn't supposed to be ... It's complicated. Real. The word hung between them like a confession. Nathaniel reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with a gentleness that made her breath catch. Would it be so terrible, he asked quietly, if some parts of it were? Unexpected complications. The February sun glinted off freshly fallen snow as Jade hurried up the brownstone steps, stamping her boots on the mat before entering. 5 months into their arrangement, and the house had begun to feel like home in ways she hadn't anticipated. She hung her coat on the rack, next to Nathaniel's. She noticed with a small smile and followed the scent of coffee to the kitchen. Nathaniel stood at the counter reading something on his tablet, brow furrowed in concentration. Since returning from the Adirondacks 3 weeks ago, something had shifted between them. No more careful distance, no more retreating to separate corners of the house. Instead, there were shared meals that stretched into long conversations, weekend outings that weren't for show, and moments increasingly frequent when their hands would find each other's without performance as an excuse. "You're home early," she said, setting down her teaching materials. He looked up, his expression clearing at the sight of her. "I wanted to catch you before your visit with Thomas." He hesitated, then added, "I thought maybe I could join you today. That's okay." Jade stilled. They'd never explicitly discussed keeping Nathaniel away from her grandfather, but it had been an unspoken boundary, one that separated their arrangement from her real life. "You want to meet my grandfather?" "I do." His eyes held hers steadily. "Unless you'd rather keep those worlds separate." The question acknowledged the line they'd been circling for weeks. Was this still just an arrangement, or was it becoming something else? "I'd like that," she decided, surprised by how much she meant it. At Pinewood, Grandpa Thomas's face lit up when Jade introduced Nathaniel. For 2 hours, the three of them talked, played cards, and shared stories, watching Nathaniel listen attentively. To her grandfather's World War II experiences, Jade felt something unfamiliar expand in her chest, a warmth that both comforted and terrified her. "He's not what I expected," Thomas said later, when Nathaniel stepped out to take a call. "The way you avoided bringing him around, I thought maybe there was trouble." Jade busied herself, adjusting his blanket. Things were ... complicated at first. Now, she met her grandfather's knowing gaze. Now they're complicated in a different way. The old man patted her hand. "The best kind of complicated there is, sweetheart." That evening, Nathaniel surprised her with dinner reservations at Bellina's, not for appearances, not for business, just for them. Over candlelight and wine, they talked about everything except the contract that had brought them together, the expiration date hanging over their heads. "I've been thinking," Nathaniel said as they shared dessert, a single tiramisu with 2 forks. "The Martinez contract is almost secured. The board seems satisfied with my leadership." He took a breath. "Our arrangement has served its purpose for me." Jade's fork stilled midway to her mouth, a cold weight settling in her stomach. "Oh, that didn't come out right." Oh. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "What I mean is, I don't need our agreement anymore for business reasons, but I find that I want..." His phone rang, interrupting whatever he'd been about to say. He checked the screen, frowning. "It's Dalton. I should take this." Jade nodded, watching as he stepped away from the table, his expression growing more serious. With each passing second of the call, he returned. His face had transformed the openness of moments, before replaced with something guarded, almost grim. "We need to go," he said, already signaling for the check. Now in the car, he finally explained. "Someone's been asking questions. About us? About our marriage?" "What kind of questions?" "The investigative kind." His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Gerald Monroe is making a play for the company. He's trying to prove our marriage is fraudulent to discredit me with the board." Monroe. The name was familiar from Nathaniel's complaints, an aggressive competitor who'd been trying to acquire Horizon Innovations for years. How would he even know to look into that? Jade asked, her mind racing. "I don't know, but his team has been interviewing people from your past. Former colleagues, neighbors." He glanced at her. "People who never heard you mention me before our sudden marriage." The implications crashed over her in waves. If their arrangement was exposed, Nathaniel could lose his company, and she... Would this be considered fraud? She asked quietly. Legally speaking? His silence was answer enough. Back at the brownstone, Nathaniel paced the living room while Jade sat motionless on the sofa, trying to process the threat unfolding around them. We need to be prepared, he said finally. If this goes public, there will be consequences. The board, the shareholders. He stopped pacing. You should know that whatever happens, I'll make sure you're protected, financially and legally. Jade looked up at him, a flicker of hurt sparking through her anxiety. Is that what you're worried about? The money? No, of course not. I'm worried about you. He sat beside her, close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw. This was my idea. My proposal. If anyone should face consequences, it's me. We both signed the contract, she reminded him. Both lied. A heavy silence fell between them, filled with all the things they hadn't said over the past months about how what had begun as pretense had grown roots, about feelings neither had dared to name. There's another option, Nathaniel said finally, his voice careful. We could end it now. File for divorce before Monroe finds concrete evidence. It would be your word against his that the marriage was ever fake. And what about you, your company? I'd handle it. The solution was logical, clean. It would protect them both. Yet the thought of walking away now, returning to their separate lives as if the past 5 months hadn't happened, left Jade feeling hollow. Is that what you want? She asked, searching his face. Before he could answer, his phone rang again. This time, the call brought worse news. Monroe's investigators got to your grandfather's care facility, Nathaniel reported, his expression grim. They're claiming we committed elder fraud by using his medical situation as part of a financial scheme. Jade felt the blood drain from her face. They're bringing my grandfather into this? They're trying to establish motive? Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. We need to decide what to do, and quickly. What options do we have? We fight it, which means prolonging the investigation and media attention. Or... He hesitated. Confirm the allegations, I step down as CEO, and we face whatever legal consequences come. And my grandfather? His care? I've already instructed my lawyer to set up a trust for him. Whatever happens between us, his care is secure. The sincerity in his eyes made Jade's throat tighten. I promise you that. Outside, rain began to fall, droplets racing down the window panes in chaotic patterns. Inside, the weight of decisions pressed down on them both. There's a third option, Jade said slowly, an idea forming. We tell the truth, not to Monroe. The investigators butt to each other. Nathaniel's brow furrowed. What do you mean? This began as a contract, a business arrangement between strangers. She took a deep breath. But that's not what we are anymore, is it? Oh. The question hung between them, loaded with possibilities neither had been brave enough to voice. No, he admitted quietly, it's not. So maybe instead of ending our marriage or defending a lie, we... She struggled to find the right words. Maybe we decide what's real now, what we actually want, separate from the arrangement. Nathaniel studied her face, something vulnerable opening in his expression. And what do you want, Jade? Before she could answer, the doorbell rang, shattering the moment. Through the frosted glass, they could make out the silhouettes of several people, one holding what appeared to be a camera. Reporters, Nathaniel muttered. Monroe must have leaked the story. Jade's phone began buzzing with notifications messages. From colleagues, friends, asking about headlines they'd seen. Their private arrangement was private no longer. As the doorbell rang again, and more insistently this time, Nathaniel and Jade looked at each other, to people who had begun as strangers in a paper marriage, now facing a very public reckoning. Whatever. We decide, Nathaniel said, taking her hand firmly in his. We decide together. The uncertainty of their future hung in the air between them, along with the unspoken question of whether what had grown between them was strong enough to withstand the storm breaking around them. Rewriting the contract, the conference room at Nathaniel's law firm felt sterile and impersonal. All polished mahogany and leather chairs too stiff to be comfortable. Jade sat straight-backed beside Nathaniel, watching as the lawyers exchanged. Grave looks across the table. Outside, early April rains streaked down the windows, washing away the last remnants of winter. The evidence Monroe's team has gathered is concerning, said Patricia Way, Nathaniel's lead counsel, sliding documents across the table, text messages from the initial arrangement, bank transfers, even surveillance footage showing your separate lives during the first months. 8 weeks had passed since the story broke. 8 weeks of headlines, of photographers camping outside the brownstone, of endless strategy meetings and depositions. Through it all, Jade and Nathaniel had presented a united front, publicly neither confirming nor denying the allegations, refusing to give the tabloids the satisfaction of capturing their distress. "What about the claims against my grandfather's care arrangement?" Jade asked. The question that had kept her awake for countless nights. "Those we can fight," Patricia assured her. "The trust Nathaniel established is legally sound, completely. Separate from your marriage agreement." Nathaniel's hand found Jade's under the table, a silent reassurance. These small gestures had become their lifeline in the chaos, private moments of connection that reminded them why they were fighting so hard. "The board is meeting tomorrow to vote on whether to remove me as CEO, Nathaniel said, his voice steady. Despite the weight of the words, "I've been advised to offer my resignation before then." Jade's grip tightened. "And if you do?" Monroe drops his investigation. The company avoids a prolonged scandal. Everyone moves on. His attempt at a smile didn't reach his eyes. Except me, of course. And us. The question slipped out before Jade could stop it. The lawyers exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly wishing to be anywhere but in the middle of what had become more than a legal complication.
"Perhaps we should give you two a moment, Patricia,"
suggested tactfully, gathering her papers. When the door closed behind the legal team, silence fell between them. "I never meant for this to touch your life this way," Nathaniel said finally. "Your career? Your reputation? ... My choice," Jade reminded him. "I signed the contract. I knew the risks. Did you?" He looked at her directly now. Did either of us really understand what we were risking? They both knew he wasn't talking about legal consequences anymore. That evening, they returned to the brownstone to find Grandpa Thomas waiting in the living room, his wheelchair positioned by the fireplace. Since the scandal broke, they'd moved him in with them partly for protection from the media, partly because they needed the comfort of family. "You two look like you've been through the ringer," the old man observed, muting the television ware. Predictably, their story was being dissected by talking heads. "Sit down before you fall down." They obeyed, Jade sinking onto the sofa while Nathaniel went to pour drinks for them all. These moments, the three of them together in the quiet of the brownstone, had become precious islands of normalcy in their appended lives. "I've been thinking," Thomas said, accepting his whiskey from Nathaniel, "about what my Eleanor would say about all this." Jade smiled sadly at the mention of her grandmother, gone 10 years now. "She'd have a thing or two to say, I'm sure. She'd say, 'You're both missing the forest for the trees.'" He took a sip, eyes twinkling over the rim of his glass. "You're so busy managing the fallout that you've forgotten to decide what you're fighting for." Nathaniel glanced at Jade. "What do you mean? I mean, you're fighting to preserve a lie? Or to protect what that lie became?" Thomas fixed them both with the penetrating gaze that had always seen right through Jade's childhood fibs. "Because those are two very different battles." His words hung in the air as he wheeled himself toward the guest room. "Think about it," he called over his shoulder. "Preferably before you let those lawyers make any more decisions for you." Later, after Thomas had retired for the night, Jade found Nathaniel in his study, staring out the window at the rain-slicked street below. "I've been offered a teaching position in Boston," she said without preamble. "Starting in the fall." He turned, his expression carefully neutral. "That's ... good, a fresh start away from all this. Is that what you think I want? A fresh start, isn't it? What we both should want?" His voice held a forced lightness that didn't match the intensity in his eyes. "Once this is over, once I've stepped down and the investigation closes, you'll be free to move on with your life." "Free," she tested the word. "Like we were before? You could be happy again? Without all this, he gestured vaguely, encompassing, the mess their lives had become. I was never unhappy with you, Nathaniel. The admission seemed to surprise them both. Even in the middle of all this chaos, being with you has never been what made me unhappy. He moved toward her then, closing the distance between them. What are you saying, Jade? I'm saying I don't want to fight for a lie anymore. She took a deep breath. But I do want to fight for us for what's real now, not what was in that contract. For a moment, he didn't respond, and Jade felt a flicker of doubt that she misread. Everything. The touches, the looks, the moments when it seemed they'd crossed the line from arrangement to something deeper. Then his hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with a tenderness that made her breath catch. I've been trying to find the right way to tell you for months, he said softly. Since that night in the Adirondacks, maybe even before. I don't want this to end when the contract does. And let's stop pretending, Jade whispered. Let's stop. Living like we're just waiting for this to be over? His kiss was nothing like the perfunctory peck they'd shared at City Hall a year ago. This was real tender, yet urgent. An affirmation of everything they'd been circling for months. When they finally broke apart, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. Whatever happens tomorrow with the board, with Monroe, with all of it, I want you to know that you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Contract or no contract. So what do we do now? Jade asked. His smile was the first genuine one she'd seen in weeks. We rewrite the terms. The press conference was Nathaniel's idea. If they were going to face this, they would do it on their own terms. Not Monroe's or the board's or the tabloids. Standing before a room full of reporters, cameras flashing like lightning, Jade felt a strange calm. Nathaniel stood beside her. At the podium, his presence steady and sure. Thank you for coming, he began, voice clear and unwavering. Over the past weeks, there have been many stories about the nature of our marriage. Today, we want to share the truth. A hush fell over the room as Nathaniel continued. Jade and I did enter into our marriage as an arrangement. I needed stability for my company. She needed financial security for her grandfather's care. He paused, meeting the gaze of several board members in the front row. Those facts are true, but they're not the whole story. Jade stepped forward then, their rehearsed plan giving her courage. What began as a contract between strangers became real. Not right away, not as part of our original agreement, but slowly, genuinely, over time. Could have ended our arrangement when the purpose was fulfilled, Nathaniel added. Instead, we found ourselves fighting to protect not just our reputations or positions, but what had grown between us. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as the reporters realized they weren't getting the scandal they'd expected, but something more complex and perhaps more interesting. I am resigning as CEO of Horizon Innovations, Nathaniel announced, sending a fresh wave of whispers through the room. Not because of pressure or scandal, but because I've discovered there are things more important to me than my father's company or my position there. Jade watched him with pride, knowing what this cost him and what it meant a choice made, not from desperation, but from clarity about what truly mattered. As for our marriage, she said, taking over smoothly, we recently signed new papers.
What?
A contract this time, but a renewal of vows. A real beginning. Questions erupted from the reporters, but Nathaniel raised a hand for silence. One last thing. Gerald Monroe has been appointed interim CEO by the board. I wish him and the company success. The graciousness of this statement, one they'd debated for hours, left the room. Momentarily stunned as they left the podium hand in hand. Ignoring the shouted questions that followed them, Jade felt lighter than she had in months. Outside, Thomas waited in the car with their packed bags, the three of them headed for a few weeks at a quiet coastal town while the media storm dissipated. Well, the old man asked as they slid into the back seat. How'd it go? We told the truth, Jade said simply. About time? Thomas nodded approvingly. So what happens now? Nathaniel's arm slipped around Jade's shoulders, drawing her close. Now we start over. For real this time? As the car pulled away from the curb, Jade rested her head against Nathaniel's shoulder. thinking about the journey that had brought them here, from strangers signing papers to partners choosing each other, from a marriage that existed only on paper to one written in their hearts. The contract that had brought them together had long since served its purpose. The terms that would guide them forward now were different, unwritten, but far more binding: honesty, trust, and a love neither had been looking for, but both had found anyway. Outside the car windows, spring was painting the city in fresh colors. Winter's end, giving way to new beginnings. It seemed fitting, Jade thought, as Nathaniel's fingers interlaced with hers. After all, they were beginning to not as CEO and teacher, not as convenient partners in a business arrangement, but simply as Nathaniel and Jade, writing their story one day at a time, no contracts required.